The Nicomachean Ethics is Aristotle's attempt to answer the most practical question in philosophy. How should you live? Written around 350 BCE, it is named after Aristotle's son, Nicomachus, though scholars debate whether Nicomachus edited the work or simply inherited it. The book is not abstract theory. It is a manual for living well, based on observation of how successful people actually behave. Aristotle believed ethics is learned through practice, not just study. Aristotle starts with a simple observation. Every action aims at some good. You eat to satisfy hunger. You work to earn money. You exercise to be healthy. But these goods are means to other ends. The question is whether there is a final good, something we want for its own sake, and not as a means to something else. Aristotle argues that this ultimate good is happiness, which he calls eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is often translated as happiness, but it means something closer to flourishing or living well. It is not a fleeting emotion. It is a state of being that comes from living in accordance with virtue over a complete life. You cannot be eudaimon for a day or a year. It requires sustained excellence. Aristotle says one swallow does not make a spring, and one good day does not make a good life. If you are interested in philosophy about how to actually live well, not just think about it, subscribe to Snappold Wisdom. We break down the books that give you practical wisdom for real life. Subscribe now, and let us get into why Aristotle thinks virtue is a skill you develop through practice, not a trait you are born with. Virtue, according to Aristotle, is not natural. You are not born courageous or temperate. You become virtuous by doing virtuous acts. You learn courage by acting courageously in situations that call for it. You learn temperance by practicing moderation. Virtue is a habit developed over time through repetition. This is why ethics cannot be taught through lectures alone. You have to practice. Aristotle divides virtue into two types: intellectual virtues and moral virtues. Intellectual virtues like wisdom and understanding are developed through teaching and require time and experience. Moral virtues like courage, temperance, and generosity are developed through habit. Both are necessary for eudaimonia, but Aristotle focuses most of the ethics on moral virtue because it is more directly tied to action and character. The core of Aristotle's ethics is the doctrine of the golden mean. Every moral virtue is a middle ground between two vices, one of excess and one of deficiency. Courage is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity is the mean between stinginess and wastefulness. Temperance is the mean between self-indulgence and insensibility. The virtuous person hits the sweet spot, neither too much nor too little. This is not about being moderate in all things. Aristotle is not saying you should be a little bit cowardly and a little bit reckless. He is saying that the right amount of fear and confidence depends on the situation. A soldier charging into battle and a civilian walking down the street face different circumstances. Courage looks different in each context. The mean is relative to the situation and the person. Aristotle gives detailed examples of virtues and their corresponding vices. Pride is the mean between vanity and humility. Wit is the mean between buffoonery and boorishness. Friendliness is the mean between obsequiousness and surliness. He goes through a long list, showing how almost every aspect of social life involves finding the right balance. The virtuous person has good judgment about where that balance lies. Support the pursuit of wisdom with a like. Links to the book and related materials are in the description. One of the most controversial parts of the ethics is Aristotle's discussion of external goods. He argues that virtue alone is not enough for eudaimonia. You also need health, wealth, friends, and good fortune. A virtuous person living in poverty and disease is better off than a vicious person in the same circumstances, but they are not fully flourishing. Aristotle is a realist. He acknowledges that some things are outside your control, and they matter. This puts Aristotle in tension with the Stoics, who came later and argued that virtue is sufficient for happiness, regardless of external circumstances. The Stoics said you can be happy in a dungeon if you are virtuous. Aristotle would say you are virtuous in a dungeon, but you are not happy. You are enduring. Happiness requires more than just internal excellence. It requires some minimal level of external goods. Aristotle devotes significant attention to friendship, which he considers essential to the good life. He distinguishes three types of friendship: friendships of utility, friendships of pleasure, and friendships of virtue. Utility friendships are transactional. You are friends because you benefit from each other. Pleasure friendships are based on enjoyment. You hang out because it is fun. Virtue friendships are based on mutual respect for each other's character. Only the third type is true friendship. Utility and pleasure friendships dissolve when the benefit or pleasure ends. Virtue friendships last because they are grounded in something stable, the character of both people. Aristotle says a virtuous person cannot have many true friends because true friendship requires time, attention, and shared activity. You can have many acquaintances, but only a few real friends. Aristotle also discusses justice at length. He distinguishes between distributive justice, which concerns fair allocation of resources, and corrective justice, which concerns righting wrongs. Distributive justice is about proportionality. People should receive goods in proportion to their merit. Corrective justice is about equality. If someone harms you, they owe you compensation to restore balance. Both are essential for a well-functioning society. The highest form of life, according to Aristotle, is the life of contemplation. The philosopher who spends their time thinking about truth is living the best possible life because contemplation is the activity most proper to humans as rational beings. It is self-sufficient, pleasurable, and continuous. Unlike political or military activity, contemplation does not depend on external circumstances. You can think anywhere, anytime. This creates tension in the ethics. Aristotle spends most of the book discussing moral virtue and practical life, then concludes that the best life is one of pure thought. Some scholars argue this is inconsistent. Others say Aristotle is acknowledging that most people cannot live as pure philosophers, so he provides a practical ethics for ordinary life, while also pointing toward the theoretical ideal for those capable of it. Aristotle's ethics is grounded in human nature. He argues that everything has a function. The function of a knife is to cut. The function of an eye is to see. The function of a human being is to reason well. Living well means fulfilling your function as a rational, social animal. This is why virtue involves both thinking correctly and acting correctly. You need practical wisdom to know what to do and moral virtue to do it. Practical wisdom, or phronesis, is the intellectual virtue that guides moral action. It is the ability to deliberate well about what is good for you in particular circumstances. It is not the same as cleverness. A clever person can figure out how to get what they want. A practically wise person knows what to want. Phronesis requires experience, good upbringing, and the ability to see what matters in complex situations. Aristotle emphasizes that ethics is inexact. Unlike mathematics, which deals with universal truths, ethics deals with what is generally true. The right action depends on context. You cannot create a rule that covers every situation. This is why you need practical wisdom. Rules are useful, but they cannot replace judgment. The virtuous person knows when to follow the rule and when the rule does not apply. Here is what you do with the Nicomachean Ethics. First, identify the extremes in your own behavior. Are you too cautious or too reckless? Too generous or too stingy? Too trusting or too suspicious? Aristotle says most people naturally lean toward one vice or the other. The first step is recognizing your tendency. Then you can aim for the mean by consciously pulling yourself toward the opposite extreme until you find balance. Second, practice the virtues you want to develop. You cannot become courageous by reading about courage. You have to act courageously in situations that scare you. You cannot become generous by thinking generous thoughts. You have to give. Aristotle is clear. Virtue is built through repetition. You become what you repeatedly do. If you want to be virtuous, start acting virtuously now, even if it feels forced at first. Third, cultivate friendships based on virtue, not just utility or pleasure. Ask yourself, are my friendships making me better or just more comfortable? True friends challenge you to grow. They hold you accountable. They share your values. If your friendships are purely transactional or purely fun, they will not last and they will not contribute to your flourishing. Invest in relationships with people you respect. The Nicomachean Ethics has influenced Western thought for over 2,000 years. Medieval Christian philosophers like Thomas Aquinas integrated Aristotle's ethics into theology. Modern virtue ethics revived Aristotle in the 20th century as an alternative to utilitarianism and deontology. The golden mean shows up in everything from psychology to management theory. Aristotle's focus on character and habit remains relevant because human nature has not changed. Critics of Aristotle argue that his ethics is too elitist. The good life he describes requires wealth, education, leisure, and social status. Slaves, women, and laborers are excluded from his vision of eudaimonia. He assumes a stable, aristocratic society where people have the resources and freedom to develop virtue. Modern readers rightly question whether his ethics can apply to people living in poverty or oppression. Others criticize the vagueness of the golden mean. How do you know where the mean is in any given situation? Aristotle says it requires practical wisdom, but that seems circular. You need wisdom to know what virtue is, but you develop wisdom through practicing virtue. The ethics does not provide a formula. It assumes you already have some moral sense and just need to refine it through experience. But this vagueness might be a strength, not a weakness. Aristotle refuses to reduce ethics to a set of rules. He insists that context matters, that judgment is irreducible, and that becoming good is a lifelong process. There are no shortcuts. You cannot download virtue. You have to build it through years of practice, failure, and adjustment. That is less comforting than a rule book, but it is more honest. The Nicomachean Ethics is not an easy read. It is dense, repetitive, and sometimes contradictory. Scholars still debate whether the text we have is complete or cobbled together from lecture notes. But the core ideas are clear and practical. Happiness is the ultimate goal. Virtue is the path. The mean is the method. Practice is the requirement. Friendship is essential. Contemplation is the peak. These principles have guided millions of people for millennia. Here is the bottom line. The Nicomachean Ethics is Aristotle's guide to living well. Happiness is not pleasure or wealth. It is flourishing through a life of virtue. Virtue is not innate. It is a habit developed through practice. Every virtue is a mean between two vices. Courage is between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity is between stinginess and waste. You find the mean through practical wisdom and experience. True friendship is based on virtue. The highest life is contemplation. The book is practical, not abstract. Aristotle gives you a blueprint. Identify your vices. Practice the opposite. Aim for the mean. Cultivate good friends and pursue wisdom. This video was created by combining human research and script writing with AI-assisted visuals and production. Links to the book and related resources are in the description below.